Hello, everyone, and welcome to Expanding PeopleSoft Accessibility, presented by Scott Hirni of PeopleUX/Appsian. My name is Scott Lavery, and I am the head of marketing here at Appsian. And I'd like to thank you all for participating in the last presentation of day one of the PeopleSoft Innovation Summit. Just a few quick housekeeping notes. Everyone, of course, is on mute. The session is being recorded, and we'll make sure to get that recording out to everybody likely within the next week. We'll also be posting it to the official PSFTSummit YouTube channel. You can go there now if you want to check out the content from September when we did the summit, and then of course the content from this event will be there as well, probably within the next week or so. Last but not least, we will be on for about 60 minutes, so there will be plenty of time for Q&A. I would highly encourage you to put your questions in the questions section of the control panel. It's located on the right side of the screen. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Scott to begin today's presentation. Scott.
Hey, great. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. So good morning, good afternoon, or for those East Coasters like myself, if you're actually on, good evening. Thank you so much in advance for taking the time to listen to this last presentation of the day. So as Scott mentioned, we're going to be talking today about accessibility and as it relates into PeopleSoft solutions specifically. I'm also joined in the background by my colleague Jenny Goncalves, who heads our PeopleUX development and services team. So she's available to help answer any questions that may pop up as we go through the presentation. And please, by all means, ask any questions as you go along. This is a very important topic. It's a very complex topic, and it's one that has been popping up very much so in the forefront in the last, I would say, couple of years, a year or 2 years. So please, if you have any questions at all, throw them out at any time, and we'll be happy to take them in stride. All right. All right, so as we go through, then let's see here, and then I'll let my team let me know if the screens are not displaying properly as we go through. So briefly, as an introduction, my name is Scott Hirni, and I'm the Director of the User Experience Solutions here at Appsian. I've been here, it'll be 3 years Friday, actually. It'll be my 3-year anniversary here. Prior to that, I spent 18 years at PeopleSoft and Oracle, so I was with PeopleSoft when we got hugged and gobbled up by Oracle back in 2004 and 5. So my career at PeopleSoft and Oracle was focused primarily on PeopleTools. So the technology and infrastructure that surrounds your PeopleSoft systems across all pillars, and the PeopleSoft portal/interaction hub was my product expertise and one I spent the most time on. And I was on the sales side and also the customer support side, helping customers understand new features and functions that came in PeopleTools, as well as helping them with any issues they were having. So. And I'm based out of Northern Virginia, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. And I'll be happy to make sure my contact information is available afterwards for anybody who would like to get in contact to talk further about the subject or anything PeopleTools or PeopleSoft related. I'm always willing to chat with folks. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? So, you know, accessibility is something, to be quite honest, I wasn't well versed on when I came here. You know, over the years, many years of doing RFPs for PeopleSoft and for Oracle, you know, when typically they'd be dropped, if it was state, local, fed, if it was higher education, they would be dropped into my lap to answer the platform questions, integration, security, workflow, all that awesome stuff. And then there was always the 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 questions that related to, are you ADA compliant? Are you Section 508 compliant? Do you conform to WCAG, whatever the standard was, A, AA, AAA at the time? So that would always fall in my lap, upon which I would read in people books that says that we PeopleSoft were, and so you know, I checked the box to say that we were. And that was pretty much how I handled it through all those years of answering those RFPs. And coming here, working on user experience and improving the user experience around PeopleSoft applications, I don't like to use the word byproduct, and Jenny gets mad at me when I do that, but it really is one of the things that sort of came about as we were working on what we do for PeopleSoft applications, was that because of the way that we restructure HTML, because of the way we basically present PeopleSoft in a semantic way, which we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a minute, we were able to make PeopleSoft applications behave in an accessible manner. And this is not to say that PeopleSoft and Oracle is not an accessible application. It's not to say that they don't do that. It's not to say that they don't care about it, which it's completely the opposite. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the background about PeopleSoft and Classic and Fluid and all that kind of stuff in just a few minutes about where that is and where they're going with that. But honestly, in the last couple of years of being over here, accessibility has been an extremely hot topic, especially among the higher education customers that we have out there. And why is that? Well, so I've got a couple slides here that I borrowed from one of our partners that I'll be also talking about, a third-party accessibility consulting firm that is based also in Northern Virginia here called Level Access. So I borrowed a couple of their slides. And you know, the point to these things is we're not here to read through slides. I don't really want to have a conversation, but is that there has been an absolute surgence and resurgence of lawsuits and Justice Department cases about compliance violations for a multitude of software systems. And this is not just PeopleSoft or Oracle, of course. It's anything from the SAPs or e-business suites or third-party applications or applicant programs or prospecting systems. Basically, anything that you can think of is faced with it. ADP, all of them. So this is not just specifically talking only about Oracle or PeopleSoft. We have to be very clear about that. But just in the last year and 2 years, the numbers have skyrocketed and they're predicted to go to double to triple over the next several years. So why is that? Why is this happening? And you know, it was interesting talking to one of, it's actually our largest customer of a statewide system, and we have a multitude of campuses that we do work in within the system, and they use the term ambulance chasers, which I think if you've been around, you know what that term kind of alludes to, right? To the folks following car accidents or motorcycle or truck accidents, and these lawyers who are and not to be disparaging for any lawyers out there, but there are certain types that do follow the ambulances, as they say, to sue, right? To create a lawsuit against, you know, for somebody who was injured or in an accident or so on. And so to use that term is to expand it also into the accessibility world. And this particular system was finding that they had a couple of students that were differently enabled and a particular law firm that was going from campus to campus to campus in a large system and basically executing the same lawsuits. And it was happening over and over and over again. And it's absolutely crazy. And you know, some of the statistics that you can read, and by the way, these slides will be available afterwards for those who would like them. But you can see that, you know, it's just a lower number of plaintiffs versus the actual number of cases, and that kind of backs the point up. The point is that where they're into a system where they see one violation, it tends that the assumption is as you go across the different campuses, across the institution, in a higher education example, you're going to find the same thing. And it also is done at the state level as well, right? State level systems that are used by multitudes of states. If you find it in one, you're most likely going to find it in another. And so I think that is the reason why this topic has been coming up over and over and over again. I know Oracle has been dealing with it. I know that we have been talking about it very, very frequently with lots of our own customers. So this is something that is definitely on the forefront of a whole lot of folks' mind now. And I think it's only going to get worse, especially, you know, with the COVID situation, a lot of remote working, students or employees or faculty or whoever they happen to be are running into situations where they may have a different level of need for enablement that they're just not getting out of whatever these existing systems are. So it's people argue one way or the other, but it definitely is a rise, and it definitely is going across the United States. It's something that's we're seeing from the Northeast down to the Southeast, or all the way to the West Coast, you know, and the folks that I speak with personally. So then it comes to the question is, you know, I get this question a lot, you know, just being around PeopleSoft for a long time, a long part of my career has been based around PeopleSoft is, They'll say, well, does Oracle care? Or they'll ask, why doesn't PeopleSoft do this? Or customers are asking PeopleSoft, well, why aren't you doing this? And the answer to the question is that they are actually doing it. They have gotten a lot better about it too. And well, I'll talk about why that is. But, if you go back a bit, and you can find this in Oracle documentation, so it's not something I'm making up, but, when PeopleSoft itself, and this is probably sort of been back around 850 PeopleTools. So what was that? That was 2009, right? So that was about 2009. So around then is when they really started to audit the pages inside PeopleSoft. This is before Fluid, right? This was still classic. Started to audit the pages to look at accessibility. That's not to say they never thought about it before. I'm certainly not saying that, but the actual auditing, and it's documented, you can go read this on Oracle support, so it's there. It's really where they started to take a hard, close look at it, right? So PeopleTools group has always made the tools available, but it was up to the developers and the pillars, whether it be HCM, FSCM, ELM, CRM, Portal, or over into Campus Solutions, whatever development team was working on the application, just like they use PeopleTools to do whatever it is that they need to do, integration, brokers, security, whatnot, you also have to be able to use the accessibility functions and features and widgets that are available to the developer to add accessibility to whatever they're creating. So it really goes back down to the source creation. So the idea being is if you're thinking about a perfect world where it's a generic kind of environment where you're creating this application, well, what are you going to do? You're going to design your pages, you're going to create your pages, and then you may go ahead and you take your glasses off, you put on your second pair of glasses, which is your accessibility glasses, and then you give it another look. Okay, did we do that in a purposeful way? Did we do it in an accessible way? Do we create enablement? Are we inclusive of everyone? And if not, then those pages need to be updated and changed in order to meet those standards. That's why the standards are there, right? You have the law, the ADA Section 508, you have the accessibility guidelines, WCAG, WCAG, you'll hear this term a lot. The current is version 2.1, and then there's multitudes of AA and AAA levels within that version. But you have to go put that on, and then you have to judge the work that you did to make sure that it is done in an accessible way. PeopleSoft wasn't always done that way. Neither was SAP, neither was JD Edwards, neither was Siebel. I mean, you insert product name here, and you'll find the same thing, right? So, PeopleSoft itself as a company developing the products that are out there today, when they were creating additional classic pages or changing pages around or fixing them, right, again, before Fluid, they would go in and do it, at least on the self-service side, the mainstream users try to do it in an accessible way. Well, Oracle got a whole lot better with it, and I say Oracle, but it's really the PeopleSoft team that's doing the work, right? The PeopleSoft team has done a fantastic job of looking at it even harder. And when you take a look at Fluid, right, for those folks that are dealing with Fluid, and it depends on which pillar you're on, because pillars use Fluid differently. From HCM, I think a lot would argue would be the highest user of Fluid, down to, I would say, I guess Portal, if you want to put it in there. Portal Interaction Hub is probably the least, or Campus Solution is a close next to last, if you were to ask me, in my opinion. But anyway, the point is, when they created these Fluid pages, as they were creating them, they were creating them in an accessible way. And I'm going to show you that here before the end of the session. We're going to go in and look at a bunch of pages and kind of make that comparison so you can see the work that was done. And I compliment them, especially being in there and knowing the pressures they were under, dealing with cloud sales and all that kind of stuff that we don't need to get into at this particular point. But the point is that they were under a lot of pressure to do a whole lot of things, but they did a really good job. So why is it that way? So why are things the way? Why couldn't they just flip a switch and get it done? Well, because PeopleSoft's not coded as an HTML product, right? That's not done that way. It's programmatic, right? So anybody who's a PeopleSoft developer, you use that thing called App Designer, and anybody hanging around was on Jim Marion's presentation earlier today. I think he loves App Designer more than anybody does. So I'm a PeopleBook fan, he's an App Designer fan, we each have our own thing. It's just how it works. Anywho, coming back and focusing, because of the fact it's done in metadata, right? The HTML is done programmatically. It's done at runtime, right? So the app server is going ahead and compiling, caching that HTML, serving it stateless, serving it back up to the web server is proxying in whatever the content it needs to, and then shipping that down to the end user. Well, and when it's done programmatically, you can't very easily flip a switch and make a change. It just doesn't work that way. And that's just, it's just a design pattern. It's just the way PeopleSoft works. And it does all the great things that it does, but it does carry alongside this one area of difficulty. But let's also be honest too. How many pages are in PeopleSoft? I mean, I lost track. I haven't looked in a long time, but there's thousands and thousands and thousands of pages inside PeopleSoft if you were to add it all up, right? Thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. It's not just as simple as going back and starting and looking at every single one. They're not going to do that. It's not going to happen, right? So that creates a problem. And then we get into conversations around screen reader mode and overlay mode. We're going to talk about all that stuff briefly, but I think it's very important. You can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been, right? So I'm a big fan of laying the foundation, understand why are things the way that they are. I always like to do root cause to understand why things are. I just don't accept the fact that it is that way. It's a character flaw that I have among many, but I do like to understand it. So I just want you all to understand where it's coming from. So it's not a disparaging comment. It's just, this is the architecture. This is how it was done. This is how it was developed and when it was developed. And this is how great of a job they've done going on. And I'm going to show that to you. Okay? So moving through, when we talk about what it is that we do, it's important to understand this other term. So as we get into it now, sort of like diving into the meat of the presentation, we're talking about, you hear the term PeopleUX. So PeopleUX is our product, it's a product that I run here at Appsian. And it is a product that is not an overlay product. It's not considered to be something that wraps around PeopleSoft. You know, I would argue time and time again against anybody who does fluid work. Fluid is to me is an overlay, right? It's a style, it's a wrapper. I mean, there are, you check boxes and you have different kind of widgets inside App Designer, but at the end of the day, they're all still classic. It's just how they're being viewed, right? And that's why you have fluid as a style sheet, right? So, but coming back in the PeopleUX world, the thing that I want you to understand here is that what we do in terms of accessibility is that we basically take the HTML that does come out of the PeopleSoft web server, right? WebLogic, so it's coming out of WebLogic. We're taking that HTML and we're basically ripping it apart. We're sanitizing it. We're taking out the PeopleSoft specific stuff and we're making it structured and essentially semantic. We are making a programmatic, structured, semantic HTML application, and it happens to be called PeopleSoft. So it looks and behaves the way that PeopleSoft does, but behind the scenes, it is structured like a pure web program or web application should be done, right? So that's the difference is, and PeopleUX does a whole lot of things. We're not here to talk about that. I want to talk about specifically about accessibility. And because of that work that we were doing behind the scenes to make PeopleSoft look and behave differently, right? We started on classic pages. We could take a classic page that you can't run on a mobile device, and we make it look like a modern cloud-like page that you run on a mobile device without any work. And one of the things we did, we said, well, okay, wait a second. If we're already doing that, why don't we go in and make in structure and put the right tags in, the right markers in there, and the alt text and all of these things to make it accessible? Well, why not? We're already doing all of that work anyway. Why not just take it to the next level to handle accessibility? And that's what we've done. So that the idea at the end of the day is any page comes through PeopleUX, as it gets processed, it doesn't matter whether it's a fluid or classic plus or classic page, and no matter what the application pillar, it's irrelevant. As long as it comes out of App Designer, when it comes through our engine, that's what it is. The engine then goes ahead and makes that HTML5 responsive and makes it all look the same, but also it makes it accessible. Right? So as I said before, as we were talking about this, is that our design paradigm was to create structured semantic HTML application. We wanted you to have an application that didn't have to be skinny down on features and functions. How many times have you seen PeopleSoft decide in a generic way? How many times have you seen an application that behaves differently on a desktop or a laptop? I guess I'm dating myself here, a laptop computer versus you're on a mobile device. Well, sure, it makes sense from a design perspective, but all those features and functions should still be there. Anybody who is used, like for instance, the PeopleSoft, the screen reader mode from a traditional sense, not talking about fluid, but you remember if you ever checked that box, right? And you went in and the screens look structured and flat and like in a straight column, right? Remember when they were doing that on some of the classic stuff? Well, that is basically going to a different layout and look and feel, and less functionality than you had when you're dealing with the regular page, right? So that it could be processed by a screen reader properly. Fluid, again, is different. That was designed from the ground up, which really comes to my fundamental thing that I want to get across here. You have to be very careful for anybody who's out there and listening and paying attention. This is important. You know, when you're talking to third-party companies out there and they say, yeah, we make products accessible, we're really good at it, it's what we do, we don't care what product you're running, it doesn't matter if it's a Fox Pro application, I don't care if it's on the mainframe, it doesn't matter, we do it all. It's great, we just got this overlay system, we put it on there, done. The minute that you hear that term overlay is when the alarms need to go off. It's very, 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 very important to understand what that really means. Overlays don't fix accessibility problems. They only mask them, and they only mask some of them. I want it to be very clear, because it seems like a cheap fix, and if it's too good, it sounds too good to be true, as I tell my kids all the time, it is too good to be true, because it really is. What it does is it goes in there and it turns on things like maybe it magnifies the cursor, or it does contrast, it maybe does changes screens to monochrome, maybe it enlarges text, right? But what it's doing is, think of it, you know, you still have the same underlying page that has the violations that it has, but over the top of it, you're sort of wrapping around it like, you know, almost like a style sheet, almost like that, loosely speaking, wrapping around it to give it a different look and feel. And yeah, it looks accessible, but it only covers maybe the top 10 or 20% of violations. But if it goes any deeper, if somebody puts a set of tools against them, if it goes through an evaluation, if it gets an ambulance chaser that comes off of it, what happens? It'll fail. And then you'll be left with getting a letter from the Department of Justice saying that you've violated somebody's rights. And that's a problem. So please, please, please understand that when you hear the term overlay, it's something that you want to run the opposite way from. It will not take care of what you need to do. You're better off dealing with it in side the PeopleSoft application itself, you know, yourself dealing with it. Oracle is going to deal with it. You know, they're always working on accessibility for all of their stuff that they do in PUMS. We know that, that's a fact. Or you look at other solutions, and that's why we are very passionate about this, because it is completely different behind what we do. So when we talk about the way that we tackle this is because of the fact we don't just sit on top of it, we literally inspect all of it, all of that HTML that's been generated by PeopleSoft, regardless of the screen type. And then we go through and we make sure that we plug it in the parts to make it accessible. We treat grids the same way, and drop downs and buttons and group boxes and HTML areas and so on, drop zones and so on. So think of all the objects that you can put on a page, activity guides, any of that stuff. It's all going to be processed and accessed the same way by PeopleUX, okay? So semantic HTML is an important concept to understand when you are developing web applications. If you are a web developer out there, these are the things that you are doing. You are creating semantic applications, or you should be creating semantic applications that have structured HTML code that has meaning to it, has purpose and meaning to it. Okay. So this is not for reading now. I want to be very clear about this. This is for the leave behind layer later. This is it takes through a number of areas of challenge that an end user may have. In this example, you see blindness and low vision. And these are the different types of technologies that somebody might use if they have that challenge, right? In order to be enabled to do what they need to do. And then on the PeopleUX side, what it is that we do inside of our product that sits on top of PeopleSoft to remedy the situation, right? So that it works with whatever assistive devices that they have and provides that solution. And this also the same applies to any custom screens you've done. So maybe you're that one customer, and in my 25-year career at PeopleSoft, I have not met one customer that's gone vanilla on PeopleSoft. I came close on a CRM system a very long time ago in 2003. I remember them specifically, an insurance company. But if you're that one, please let me know. I'd love to meet you. But if you have customized PeopleSoft and you had created bolt-ons and you have created extra components and pages and whatnot, regardless, again, classic or fluid or whatever, doesn't matter, that, you know, coming through the PeopleUX side, again, we don't care. We're going to go ahead and make that page accessible for you. Right? That's our purpose. That's our goal. That's what we're doing. So again, some more for the leave behind, some things that you can read about later. We can always have another session to talk about these in more depth. It's very hard to cover all this in a 1 hour period. And especially it's late at night, and if I don't even know if there's anybody online anymore. For all I know, I'm talking to nobody. But that's okay, I like to hear myself talk. Okay, so as we keep moving, all right, how do we deal with that? What do we do? There's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of ways to look at these things. The way that we look at it is that a standard is a standard. So we basically follow the Section 508 requirements. We looked at the WCAG, WCAG, 2.1, A and AA. AA is where you get into the digital world. AAA is a very hard level to be compliant to. We don't measure ourselves against that. It's too hard for us to do. There's only so far we can push PeopleSoft, right? There are things that are done deep inside PeopleSoft that just can't be changed. We'll talk a bit about that in a minute. But we here at Appsian, we go through a number of tools. You can see them listed here from all the browser types, of course, right? We work across the same platforms that PeopleTools goes against. So anything from the Edge to the Chromes to Firefox, as you can see here, Wave, the Chrome tools, Axe, Chrome Lens, any number of those tools that we go through and check our work to make sure that we are complying against the WCAG 2.1 level requirements. So what did we do special? So about a year ago, just about a year ago, April of last year, we engaged with this third-party company I mentioned before, Level Access, and we decided to say, okay, we know that this is such a problem. We've been hearing about it. A lot of the higher education customers specifically are asking, hey, we use your product on the mobile devices for classic pages, or we use it on 9.0 or 9.1. We have a lot of customers out there, or 9.2, whatever it is you're doing. Accessibility is a problem. So we actually hired, and we have a subscription contract with this company, so it renews every April, where they have taken our product on top of PeopleSoft and ran it through third-party testing. So for those in the accessibility world, you're probably familiar with a term called VPAT, which is really the first word in that acronym. The V is the voluntary product assessment template, so voluntary. Typically what happens, for those who don't know what that means, so when a vendor says, we're accessible, we're compliant, they'll say, okay, can you give us a VPAT? And the VPATs are almost always, 99% of the time, they're filled out by the vendor. So if I'm trying to sell you something and I say, okay, yeah, we have accessible products, I fill out that VPAT. Now, I'm definitely not saying that everybody fills it out incorrectly. Please don't come after me right now. I'm not saying that, but put yourself in that position for just a second and think about that. So this is a vendor that's saying, I'm an expert in accessibility. Yep, okay, I am. And I'm gonna go ahead and fill this out about my product that I'm trying to sell you, and here it is. And a lot of times they check the box on that, but when we've done this for years, we've helped customers with accessibility for years. This is not a new thing we're doing. So we thought we're pretty good at it, honestly, we did. And we went out and put our product through, and we started with PeopleUX on top of Campus Solutions, because higher education is the biggest customer set out there that is focused on accessibility. So we went ahead, gave it to them. They basically took it. They used more tools than I've listed here. There's a dozen of them that they use. They have folks on there that they employ that are differently enabled. So they are actual real life users, and they're not PeopleSoft experts. They're not Oracle experts. We taught them the transactions. We took transactions like doing a class search and enrolling in a class and being able to change your personal info and faculty uses and so on and so forth. And we put it out there, and they went and did all their testing. And again, we've been focused on the accessibility space longer than I've been here. And we thought we were pretty decent at it. And we came back, and Jenny calls me and says, okay, we got our results back. We had 191 violations. 191 violations. I'm like, how is that possible? How could that actually happen? We sell a product that does accessibility for PeopleSoft. So, and what ended up happening was they went through and held us to the standard that is out there, and they had no skin in the game, right? So they basically came back and said, this is where you are lacking. This is where you're causing problems. And of course, a lot of it is, the vendor should be taking care of it. The vendor is Oracle, right? So always willing to share information if Oracle's ever interested in looking at it, happy to share it with them. But the point is, they came back and said, these are the areas that are still a violation, even with your product running on top of it. So Jenny and her team took that 191 violations down to 8 in a period of 4 months or so. And so from that 8, we have a remediation plan to take that 8 down to 4 by the middle of 2021. And then there are 3 or 4 issues that are left that are really big ones, and they are ones that Oracle should be addressing. Could we address them? Sure, we could, absolutely. But it is something that Oracle really should be taking care of. I have also that I'll make sure that we post wherever we're posting this stuff, that our VPAT as well as our remediation document, so you can read it. Jenny and I put it together. It's got all of the screenshots and all the examples and explanations of where we haven't dealt with those 8 and what our plan is to deal with those 8. But the point was not to talk to you about the product, was to say we wanted a third party to look at it, and we wanted them to say it was good, and we wanted them to be able to generate this VPAT document that we could confidently hand to a customer to say, do not worry, you're not going to get a letter from the DOJ or from a student or from a lawyer saying that you have a product and it's called PeopleSoft and it is not accessible. If you're running PeopleUX on top of that, we will complete the journey that Oracle has done for accessibility. We'll take it all the way across the finish line. That's what we do. So it was definitely an eye-opening experience for us. We learned a whole lot. And we are now, I'm keeping out of time, so yeah, I want to be able to go and I'm going to show you some actual screenshots. I'm not screen, we're going to go live into the app right now into CS and show you some stuff. We, starting this April, we're going to go against Human Capital Management 9.2. The way that we do our accessibility tends to be done in a generic way, so that the way we process a grid in Campus Solutions is the way we process a grid in financials or supply chain or ePro or benefits or whatever. It doesn't matter. A grid is a grid. So we process it the same way. My point is that the 191 things we ran into in Campus Solutions, I expect a far, 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 far less number when we get into the human capital management side, because of the fact that we have already fixed them, we've already dealt with them. Now you put PeopleUX on top of human capital management or insert supply chain or whatever it is, we're expecting it to still be some challenges. We'll have some violations, but it'll be a very small list. Right? I hope that makes sense. I hope it does. Okay, so let me do this. Let me pop out of here, and I'm going to minimize this. Okay, so what are we going to do now? I want to go in and I want to take you through and show you a couple of things just to sort of help you understand kind of what we're talking about here. All right, so we're going to start with Campus Solutions. I think that's the best place to start. This is Campus Solutions. This is 9.2. This is 858 tools. And I think this is somewhere in the neighborhood of PUM 18 or so, 19. I don't know. It's pretty relevant. I mean, current. I'd have to go take a look at it, but it's fairly current. Okay, we tend to keep our servers up to date pretty well. So this to set the stage, so you know what we're looking at here. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and log in. We're going to take a look at some classic. We're going to take a look at fluid. Okay, it's important to be able to look at both. So I'm going to log in as a student. Stand by, hold please. All right. So now we're logging in. So now I'm logging in as a student. So here we have a fluid landing page. So let's go ahead and start from the classic spot first, and then let's work into the fluid side, so we can kind of see the evolution that Oracle has done and the really great work they've done on the accessibility side. So let's pop into the famed Student Center. All right. So looking here, you've got obviously the classic Student Center. This is 9.2. There's a Tangerine style definition, so it looks should be fairly obvious to you with what we're looking at here. So let's go ahead and let's look at, you know what, actually, yep, I got ahead of myself. I got really excited. Okay, let's look at some of the personal information for a second. So if I go down into demographic data and let's go take a look at addresses. Okay. So here's a basic screen for anybody who's been on 9.2, who's not using the fluid yet. We're going there next, okay? But here's a classic for those of you who are using the classic. If they choose to do that, that's their choice. So here you are. This is the fluid page that, I'm sorry, the classic page that shows the addresses. It's late. I'm getting a little shot there. Okay. So let's open up the developer studio here, or the developer tools. All right. So next here, let's go ahead and we'll open up one tool to use. Axe is a good one from DayQ. DayQ is great. Actually, we use DayQ, Jenny and the team and us, we use them for training. to train our developers and our services folks on accessibility, so we can do our work in an accessible manner. So we use them. They're a great source for online training. If anybody's looking to learn more about it, we use them a lot for that. Okay, so here we are. We've got a classic page, taking a look at it, very simple, very straightforward. We go ahead, we run through and we do an analysis, and we pop back in and said, okay, there's 35 issues that have popped up here. Okay, now there's a number of things you want to pay attention to when you're looking at this. This is how we look at these things. So there are 35, it's a lot, but you really want to kind of look at how does it fall, right? So you've got 8 that are in critical, 19 that are serious, and 8 that are review. You know, and then a couple in between, but there are recording 0 at this moment. Review, by the way, is really the ones they say, hey, it may or may not be a problem. We think it is. We can't quite tell. You should go take a look at it and just check your own mental, you know, checkbox that yes, it works, or no, it doesn't. It's a problem. But obviously, these other ones are ones that you want to be a little more focused in. So we can click on like the critical ones, and what does it tell you here? It sort of spreads out across all of these here, and you can see things like you got the ARIA roles have to conform to valid values. You've got elements must use only allowed ARIA attributes. And you can click on any one of these and you scroll down here and it will tell you, what the issue is. In this particular case here, it says ensure ARIA attributes are allowed for an element's role. It gives you the code and then kind of tells you, what you have to do to fix it or what it thinks you have to do to fix it, right? And we can go here to the one that has 4. And you can see here, you sort of have a cursor here to work your way through 4 of them. Again, kind of takes you through, it tells you this is role related, it has to have a valid value in the role attribute. And you can click through any one of these and kind of see what they are. You can see the violations, where they, which area they got that was violated and so on and so forth, okay? So just understanding that is how that layout works. So that is on the class page. What happens if we go in and we edit an address? Okay, so there is the molded box that pops up, and if I go back through here and I run through and refresh that, now this particular window generates, we've got 52 violations that are here on, again, against 2.1, WCAG 2.1 is what they're going against. Here you're finding now particularly we've got 52 violations. Again, not here, it's not to be critical, we're not a critical session, we're just trying to inform how this works. So you can see here that it sort of spreads out from critical to serious. We can click on the serious. And here you can see that 30 of them are all of the same violation. There just happens to be 30 of them on the page. And they're basically telling you that, to follow the guidelines, you shouldn't have tab indexes greater than 0, right? So that is something that you, customer, you can go through and you have the option of either, waiting to see if Oracle is going to fix it. Again, I don't know what their plans are on these things. Or you can go in and you can go into App Designer yourself and you could create and make these changes. Like something like this, you could go through it and deal with yourself. You could actually do that. So, but then again, that's what you have to think about, because now you're carrying through a customization. Anytime you go into App Designer, that's a customization that you have to carry through on and on and on. Okay, so just for perspective, right? So this is classic, right? We're gonna go to fluid in just one second, but let me go back to that classic screen where we started looking here. Now, if we go through and we turn on the Appsian, the PeopleUX product here, so if I go ahead and do this, and I put a little flag here at the end of the URL, and that basically tells the PeopleSoft web server that I want you to go into what's called PeopleUX mode. Now, remember, we're looking at here. Let me expand my screen a little bit here so you can kind of get a better view here. So, now we're looking at, and I'm going to expand this window here. There we go. This is the Classic Student Center, right? This is the Classic Student Center behind the scenes, but this is with PeopleUX running and redoing the HTML on the fly. So now this is a mobile page. You could be running this on a mobile device, even though it happens to be a classic page. And you're saying, well, I don't believe you. I think you're lying. You have that kind of look. I know I got that kind of look. So I could go anytime and turn it back off. And when I do that, the Student Center, there it is, it's still there, right? So PeopleSoft's always running behind the scenes, but let's go back and show you the same thing. Now I want to run that same test. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pop back in, and we're going to pop down into demographics, we're going to nav the same way we did, and then we'll go down here. Did I pass it? I probably did. Yes, I did. There we go. There's demographic data. I'm going to pop into there. Stand by, hold please. And I'm going to go through, I'm going to click on to addresses. Again, these are all classic pages that you just saw, right? So you've got all the tabs that you had over on the classic page and put them into a floatable menu, but here's that same page you just looked at. Now, if I go through and I run a scan on that, right? So now in this particular example here, what was there, like 23 or something issues, something like that, 32, something. Now we've gone through and 0, right? So without you doing anything, without you changing PeopleSoft, without you making any customizations, PeopleUX running in front of it has now taken that page and gotten rid of all the accessibility issues on this particular page. If I go through and I edit, now I'm going to go through, there's the edit, right? So that was in a modal window that you saw before, dealing with on the classic side. I can go through and do the same scan, and what do we have? We had 52 issues, now we're down to 0. Okay, so that's one example of how we can correct, again, without making any changes or waiting for Oracle to do it or whatever it is. It's now done and taken care of. So what happens if I go back? Let's go back and now check Fluid, right? We talked about Fluid earlier. Let's go take a look at Fluid. So here, now we're back into regular PeopleSoft mode. I'm going to go to the landing page, the home page. So let's go into the Fluid tile, right? So when we do that, we're going to go into Fluid mode. So, and I'll show you the URL. So let's pop into here, right? So now we've got personal details. Let's click on address, right? So there it is. Now, if I go take a look at the URL, you can see right here, there's my Fluid component, right? So that shows you that you're in Fluid mode. Campus Solutions doesn't deal with Classic Plus. You could certainly do it if you wanted to, but they don't deliver that. So this is the Fluid component that they built in the pages to go for to replicate the areas of the Student Center. So here we are, same thing. Now we're looking at that same data, but now we're looking at Fluid. Now let's go ahead and run that same test again. So we go ahead and we run the scan. Now remember, before, what did we have before? Before we had something like 23 issues, but look what we got now, 2. So why is it this way? So I commend Oracle because what they've done, and I knew this when I was there was a whole accessibility department that was run over at Oracle that created the standards at all Oracle applications, whether it was PeopleSoft or whether it was the cloud applications that had to be done and how to be doing them in an accessible way. So look what they've done. So this is where you took the code, they created the page from scratch, right? Fluid is a page they created from scratch, but they did it in an accessible way. And the real remedy, and I mentioned this to you earlier, the real way to change this is to really go back to the beginning and either rewrite all those pages, or if you're creating new content like Fluid, this is a new Fluid page, right? It was created new. So now they went ahead and they created it in an accessible way and they delivered it to you. Right? So now you had 2 violations. One happens to be moderate, and then there's one that's a review. And the review is telling you that there has to be landmarks around there. So you have to demarcate the areas so that if you wanted to use something like a concept of what's called a skip link, so that if you're listening to a screen reader and you want it to skip along, it uses skip links or landmarks to do that. But pretty impressive, if you ask me. That's good job by them. That means they are paying attention. I told you before that they were, and here's the proof that they are. So they are doing a great job over there, but they've got a lot of legacy stuff that they have to deal with. What happens if we went through and we edited that page? Okay, we've got about 13 minutes left. So we pop in here, there's that modal window, we run through, we run that same scan. A little different. Now, let's break this down and see what this is, right? You see here, we've got 31 that sit into the review area, and that's important. What is that? When I click into that, basically there's 30 areas that are basically saying there's color contrast issues, which could be a problem for folks who have sight challenges. So what it's saying is that it either was dealing with like gradients, like sometimes where you see sort of that darker areas move into lighter areas, right? You see that sometimes, or it couldn't handle the text color offsetting from the background, or there's a variety of reasons why that happens. But it could be fine. These 30 things could be absolutely fine, or maybe they're not. I'm not sure, right? But the point is you could go through and you can read each one of them, and you can go through and they will tell you. So the point is, so not so bad. I'm not alarmed at that. There's 3, okay, well there's 3. So you would have to just click on it and read what it is, and it's telling that the attribute has to have a valid value. So maybe it was just a misstep, a slip up. Oh, okay, so it just needs to be corrected. And knowing the way Oracle works is if somebody reports it, and this is Fluid, so Fluid is an actively supported product, for PeopleSoft, so they'll go ahead and fix it. Right? But my point to telling you this is that you have the challenges with Classic. They paid attention, just like everybody started to pay attention, and then they started doing it the right way. They've done it in HR, they've done it in FSCM, they've done it in all their products. So I commend them for that. So let's take a look at a couple other things too while we're at it. Okay, so now let's go back here and let's go home and let's take a look at course history. Let's go do that. That's fine. I want to show something specifically here kind of briefly, and then I'm going to make sure we kind of wrap up and leave some time for questions. Okay, so again, this is fluid. Remember, we started from a tile, academic progress, and we went in. So this is, again, fluid. If we come back up here, I can see here that we are dealing with a fluid component in page. So here it is, right? There it is in all of its beautifulness, right? And if I go through and I click a scan, and I get my scan coming up, and so then what do we see here? We see 32 issues that are on this particular page. 6 are kind of review, they might be all right. 26 are sort of major. And what are these? They're not major, they're minor, but there's something you need to pay attention to. And it says alternative text of images should not be repeated as text. What the heck are they talking about? So you come down here and it says here, it tells you, oh, okay, I see here that the alternate text, which is what a screen reader would read, that's the alt text, is planned, but yet the title is planned. So we see here, planned, and they're telling you that this particular image is also planned. The alternate text is planned because when a screen reader comes through, it can't read blue star. It doesn't, it's an image, right? So what you do is you put something called alt text or alternate text in there for the screen reader to pick it up and be able to read it. I learned about that. How do I do that? Well, my PowerPoints. Creating PowerPoints, I go through and run, there's an accessibility checker inside PowerPoint. And so I learned the hard way that, when you have a lot of graphics and images that are inside a PowerPoint, well, somebody who's blind can't see that. So you need to put in alternate text to describe what it is they're looking at so a screen reader can explain it to that user so they understand what you were trying to get across in that particular slide. In this particular case, it would come across, it would say status planned. So a little annoying, but I don't know that it really provides value by saying status planned. And if I go through, I bet you, I'm gonna bet there's 26 minor violations, and I just happen to see 26 rows here. My guess is that same violation is per row. I would guess, right? So how can we verify that? Well, we can verify that by, if I expand this out a little bit, if I right click into here and if I inspect HTML and I take a look here and I look, and I have to kind of expand this out a little bit and get crazy. Ignore my head in the background there. Hang on a little bit more here. Stand by, hold please. But we can see here, look, there it is. There's the alternate text plan. There's the title planned, okay? So you can see that here, it's right here within the HTML. This is what's coming back from PeopleSoft. Okay, great, got it. Thank you for explaining that. So now if I go back over here, and what do I wanna do now? So now I wanna go through and I wanna say, let's go ahead and turn on PeopleUX and what happens here? And it's gonna be a little different. So I'm doing this on purpose. So I'll come in here and I'm gonna turn on our product, right? And it's gonna go back over here. Let's go back to Axe and I'm gonna leave it the size. Oops, did I not do that right? Stand by, pull up. 2 is not a valid value. Okay, there it is. I get there eventually. Okay, so coming back over here. So now there it is, right? This is now PeopleUX is running. So let's go ahead and run a scan. Right? So we saw, what did we see? 26 minor and something else. So here, an example is, well, we don't have any of those minor issues, 7 review, but we do have 2 critical things. And Jenny, who's on the phone, we were talking about this. And so this was actually a mix up on our part. We made a mistake on something. So that's something that we've tagged ourselves. We're gonna go in and fix, right? So we made a mistake ourselves here. So it does happen, right? We don't hit everything all of the time. We do our best to do so. But you'll notice here, you don't have that same issue that you had before. Why is that? Well, if we go through and I want to inspect that HTML, if I come back through here, right, what I'm going to see behind the scenes here is, if I can smush this down a little bit more here, and you can see here that we've got the ARIA tag hidden equals true. It turns it off. The point being is it skips over that. So, we have ways either we're going to turn things off if we turn them up, because the reality is, do you really need to, in this particular case, do you really need to go through and tell the screen reader that there is a blue star there? Or is it the screen reader really needs to know that the status is planned? And in that case, they really just need to know the status is planned. So we hide out that image because it's just not necessary for the screen reader to deal with. So basically it just sort of skips over just bypasses it, doesn't even know it's there, just ignores it, moves on its way. Status equals planned, and then it keeps reading its way down the path. Anyway, so just to kind of give you an understand, I know we've got about 7 minutes left. I want to kind of wrap us up here and see if there's any kind of questions that might be sitting out there. There's a lot to talk about. Accessibility is an extremely important topic. It's something that is I have become more empathetic with myself. I did watch a blind gentleman try to use PeopleSoft HR 9.1 and 9.2, do some employee self-service. I also watched him use Campus 9.0 and Campus 9.2 to go as a faculty member, look at a roster of his people in the class. And it was extremely painful to watch that process. And that is not, again, in a critical manner. It's just to say that myself, I was more embarrassed that all those years I had checked the box to say PeopleSoft was accessible, when the reality was it was in some degrees and it wasn't in other areas. And I think that's a fair statement to say. But I will again compliment on the fact that the fluid pages that are coming out of Oracle, if we've tested and we've looked at, they have done a lot better job on those. They are thinking about it, they are planning for it, they are accounting for it. It's not perfect. It certainly is not, because the reality is that anybody who works on a particular page or component or area of PeopleSoft, let's say HR, and checks something out, that person has to work in conjunction with everybody else. So everyone has to follow the same rules. Everyone has to have the same pair of glasses to take on and take off, so that you can make sure that you do your accessibility checks before you check a code in to distribute it down in a PUM that goes out to your end users. Or maybe there's more underlying reasons why it is that way it is, because there are some things that are pretty deep in PeopleSoft that are, and one of them is listed in the remediation document we have out there, that is impossible for us to correct because it's so deep, and so that's going to continue to permeate through. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about is we're acknowledging that accessibility is important. We're acknowledging that it is a challenge for every software company out there. We acknowledge that we're not the best people to be talking about our own levels of accessible compliance. We rely on a third party. I mean, we're a small company and it costs us a lot of money to do so, but we did it because it was the right thing to do, to be confident in what we're saying. And that when we're creating a better user experience for PeopleSoft, and we're using the things that Oracle delivers, but we're trying to take it to another level, or taking the older PeopleSoft products and making them look like a modern web application without making any work for yourselves, we wanted to make sure that we did it in a purposeful and an accessible way. And so that's sort of our paradigm that we've approached all the work that we do here for PeopleUX for all of the Oracle products. Appsian does a whole lot of things on the user experience side. I run that side of the business. We only work on PeopleSoft. We do not work on any of the other products that our security platform works on. We don't deal with SAP or eBusiness or any of that stuff. I only deal with PeopleSoft. That's our world and will continue to be our world. So anyway, in the last few minutes of it, I hope that you found this somewhat helpful. This content will be made available out there. We'll be having additional deeper dives into accessibility. That'll be coming from Scott and his team. But before we hang up in the next 3 minutes and give you your evenings back, Scott, is there any questions sitting out there, or are people pretty much done with me? It's okay.
Oh, we're all pretty much done with you, Scott. But anyway, if anybody has any questions, you can certainly put those in the question section of the control panel. You were starting to touch on it. I mean, we got a couple questions around HCM and self-service and what was available from an accessibility standpoint there.
Right, absolutely. So the HCM team, Robin Vlademan and his team have done a fantastic job on the HCM side, on the ESS, MSS, on the fluid stuff. They do a tremendous amount of work on fluid, as I already told you. We've tested a number of their pages. They've gotten so much better across, whether you're looking at e-performance, or you're looking at benefits enrollment, or actually I haven't tested recruiting, so I haven't tested eRecruit, but I'm sorry, Candidate Gateway, excuse me, I'm sorry. So they've done a great job. There are still some challenges in those areas, and they know that as well. So for us, in early testing that we've done with PeopleUX on it, we've remedied a lot of those areas already. When we do the certification that's going to start here in about a month and a half, we should be able to generate that VPAT in a matter of weeks. because we're only going to see some minor tweaks that we need to do with UX running on top of it because of the way that we deal with things externally. But you're a lot of the way there. You're much farther in HCM to compliance than you are with CS. Again, that's just a fact. But we are already, our PeopleUX on top of it takes advantage of all the work we've already done on the campus solution side. So it's a win-win for everyone.
Okay, great. Well, since we're actually pretty much at the bottom of the hour, any parting thoughts before we go ahead and close up?
Thank everybody for so much for taking the time this evening. If anybody on the East Coast, I know it's late and I'm sorry, but I look forward to speaking with you, and I'm always available for anything, PeopleSoft, Fluid, anything you want to talk about. I'm a free resource. Contact me anytime. I'm happy to help. So thank you so much and have a wonderfully safe evening.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Scott. Appreciate the presentation. We know it's late. We certainly appreciate you being the headliner tonight. Want to let everyone know that if there are any questions about PeopleUX, if you want to get a hold of Scott, I mean, you can obviously do that through info@appsian.com or scott.hirni@appsian.com. Either one of those will work. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we do have an official Slack channel that we're encouraging people to sign up for, and there's some cool conversations going on in there. If you're interested in that, PSFTSummit.slack.com. Pretty easy to sign up. I want everybody to know that to keep their eye out for an email from us on Friday. We'll be sending out a survey about the sessions today and tomorrow, and want to get your feedback. We are planning the next PeopleSoft Innovation Summit, so all of that feedback is greatly helpful to us. And I would certainly encourage you to go to PSFTSummit.com. We have a full slate of sessions tomorrow. We'll be starting at 9 a.m. Central and going till 4:30 p.m. Central. All new sessions, all new presenters. It's a jam-packed kind of a day. So highly recommend everyone go check that out. There are plenty of things to register for. If you can't make the session live, sign up for it anyway. You'll get the recording later on. And yeah, so thank you for being a part of, if this was your first session or your 7th session today, we thank you so much for being a part of day 1 of our second PeopleSoft Innovation Summit. This is a pleasure for us at Appsian to pull together and present to you all. Anything we can do to help the PeopleSoft community is vastly, vastly important to us. So we appreciate your participation, and we will see you all bright and early at 9 a.m. Central Time, where we'll be talking about PeopleSoft push notification frameworks and digging into communication channels through PeopleSoft. So until then, we'll see you tomorrow morning. Have a good evening.